Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr. Thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us. And with me is my partner in crime, who I miss so much while she was, globe-trotting around the world, taking important pictures of daily life in London and Spain, the incomparable Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, we missed you. Welcome back.
Hola.
Hola.
Gracias. It's great to be here. It's so funny. We were traveling, and at the end of the trip, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so sad. We have to go home. It's so sad. I said, yeah, it's sad the vacation's over, but I get to go to Miami.
Exactly.
Yeah, they wanted to smack me, but that's why we live here.
Our agent Rita was in Italy for about 10 days, and she told me the same thing. She was like, I loved it. It was great. We loved it. The family enjoyed it, but we were all so happy to be back in Miami. Something about this place, man, it's unbelievable. And Miami is at the center of the topic today, specifically Miami Spice.
Yes, Miami Spice Month, which is actually 2 months, but we're going to talk about it. I'm already hungry. No, at all. I'm like, by the end of the day, I'm going to be drooling. You know how much I love food. But Miami has become a culinary powerhouse. When I moved here 30-something years ago from San Francisco, I was a little disappointed in the options available. Miami Beach had some good eating spots, and there were a couple local places, and Coral Gables was known as the place to be. But we are on the map. We were named by Bon Appetit as their 2023 Food City of the Year. And I love their quote because they did such an amazing job at describing our beautiful city. And this is a direct quote. Where New York has a sheer volume of restaurants and Los Angeles has a health-conscious flair, Miami has a standout personality of its own, one that has proven to be the most exciting of all. Miami is still considered a young city, which means it is continually evolving and pushing boundaries. The attention hasn't gone unnoticed. The city is attracting everyone from the world's most talented chefs to the up-and-coming stars. This is my favorite part. If Miami were part of a proverbial culinary family, it would be the ambitious younger sibling, already primed to outshine its predecessors thanks to its energy and momentum.
Wow.
Mic drop. Mic drop. Thank you, Bon Appetit.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's awesome. That is
Isn't that
really
beautiful?
a great. Yeah, that's great writing and very, very on point. For those of you listening, this is going to be a very short episode because we're recording before lunch and we're going to talk about food and we're very, very hungry. But let's talk about this. This is really interesting because when you start digging into a little bit of the stats of Miami Spice and what it is, you start to see that there has been a great evolution on this program and that it has influenced other cities to adopt a like-kind program. So can you tell people a little bit about, especially those that are listening outside of Miami, what is Miami Spice and a little bit of its evolution?
Sure. So even though that quote says we're on the culinary map and we're the place to be, after 9/11, tourism dropped and our restaurants were really, really hurting. So the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce and a couple of other, local businesses, especially restaurants, got together And we're trying to come up with ideas to help stimulate the economy, especially among the locals, because they're like, if tourists aren't coming here, how do we help? And so they came up with Miami Spice. Originally, they were looking at 1 week, and then typical Miami, they're like, no, we're not going to do 1 week. Other places are doing 1 week. Let's make it bigger. And they made it 1 month, which was August 1st, and then they extended it into September. The ironic thing is that the summer months for most other states in the country are their busy season.
Right.
And the dead months for those places are usually December through February, which is our high season.
Right.
But if you've been in Miami in July and August, you know the heat and humidity are at its highest points. And so a lot of people leave and travel and kids are out of school. So what Miami Spice does, and even though, again, we're on the map, it's just something that's become so popular among our locals, is that participating restaurants have special menus that allow locals and obviously tourists the opportunity to dine at some of our top restaurants for reasonable prices. This year it's $30 to $35 for lunch and brunch and $45 to $60 for dinner. And one of the things I love about Miami Spice is, Fernando, you and I often talk about being boots on the ground to get to know a neighborhood and a market, and how the neighborhood itself, given what it has, can be an amenity. As you discussed, I just came back from Europe, and one of the way that my husband and I explored neighborhoods was just simply walking around, seeing what the locals were doing, seeing where the locals were eating. Our son in London happens to live across the street from what has to be the most popular coffee shop. It's tiny. If it's 300 square feet, it's a lot. All they do is coffee. And there is a line out there all the time. Right next to it is an equally tiny little bakery. And that place gets full because, you know, if you want something with your coffee, you have to go to a bakery. And then they're next to one of the most popular pubs. So luckily, we didn't have to walk too far to experience all of those. But with Miami Spice, what that allows us to do is explore neighborhoods. You know, we all kind of get locally, we get comfortable in our own spots. We have our favorite neighborhood places that we go. This gives you an incentive to travel a little bit further from home to try something that you normally might not. And I couldn't say it better than the Chief Operating Officer of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, Rolando Aedo, who summed up Miami Spice like this: the best thing about Spice is that you can help you get out of your comfort zone and into new neighborhoods. After all, there's no better way to explore Miami than through food. So thank you for joining us today. We're done. We're going out to lunch now.
I do like it because he goes on to speak about the discovery that there is great food everywhere in Miami, you know, and that, you know, whether you go to Little Havana in North Miami, you go really any neighborhood in Miami, especially when you look at the list of Miami Spice, has something special to, as a, you know, let's say a culinary tour of our city. I also love the growth. You know, this started with about 30 restaurants.
I know.
And now it's, you know, a little over 300 restaurants, and there's even some catering companies that have also joined in to create a Miami Spice venue. And I think that there's something really special. You and I have clients in the food and beverage industry. It feels like there is a really strong sense of community that has developed in the city of Miami, that started with Miami Spice, you know, in 9/11, but that only got stronger during the pandemic, you know, year. I think that there is a real sense, and you know, soon we're going to have an interview with one of these restaurateurs. But I want to ask him this question, but I think the answer is going to be that there is a strong sense of community among, you know, restaurateurs here in South Florida.
It's interesting because that did come up in the Bon Appetit article. They interviewed six restaurants and restaurant owners, and almost every single one of them said that it was very collaborative, which you and I like to hear because, like real estate, it can also be pretty competitive. So aside from the obvious, you know, I mean, we're promoting Miami Spice, we're promoting Miami,
Right.
but more importantly, how it relates to commercial real estate
Yeah.
in our area. And, you know, the NAR May report stated what we already know and what we've been feeling here for a long time. But overall, in the country, the retail sector has the tightest availability in the entire commercial real. It's actually taken over industrial. It's only 4.7% of retail space nationally is currently available for lease. It's the lowest level ever on record. And due to that, the vacancy rate is near 4%. So you put that tight retail inventory into a market that is booming, which is Miami. Miami continues to be extremely strong economically. And so restaurants, you know, are competing with other retailers who are opening or expanding here for restaurant space. So we've been hearing a lot about restaurants closing in Miami, and the headlines always are like, oh, another restaurant closes, another restaurant closes. But the reality is for everyone that closes, there are probably 5 to 10 people that want that space.
There seems to be a long line of suitors for those spaces continually. And one of the things that I've noticed is I'm seeing a shift in a lot of food and beverage operators in that they're looking where they have the opportunity to do so, to buy their space instead of leasing the space. You know, they want to have longevity and they want to have control over their real estate destiny per se. And I think that they're seeing that there is great value in the real estate side of it for not only their foreseeable future, but for their long-term investments on their deals.
Right. And to that point, so I was going to talk about leasing, and I think that's actually a good tie-in because the biggest investment or the biggest cost outside of labor and food for a restaurant is their physical space.
Yeah.
And the amount of money that they spend on FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment is significant.
Correct.
And to me, it's kind of like a medical use, right? So a tenant who goes into a restaurant space or a tenant who goes into a medical space is spending a lot of money to get their specific equipment, their specific look into that space. And if you look at some of the restaurants in Miami, I mean, easily $500,000 in FF&E, right? So to your point, if I'm spending that much money now, the landlord knows pretty much how much I'm into the space for if I'm doing brand new build out. So when it's time to renegotiate my lease, what kind of a position am I in compared to the landlord? Whereas if I own the space, I'm not going to lose my investment. And to be fair, a lot of restaurants, I mean, my brother-in-law owns a lot of them in Mexico, and he's constantly closing and updating and revamping just to get new concepts into his space. So that could happen. But there are a lot of them. I mean, Joe's has been around forever, right? And they haven't changed much. So
still at the top of the food chain, for sure.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting because it's very hard to find space that you can acquire. Even if you had the ability to be able to acquire an entire strip center just so you could anchor your restaurant in there, that's also a very hard thing to find, right? And to find it in the right location and in the right demographic composition that is going to feed your food and beverage concept. And so, what I'm seeing as an alternative is a lot of longer lease negotiations, which is a risk because, the restaurant industry is very risky, but I am seeing a proclivity to say, how long can I control the space? Can I have control of the space for a 15-year period so that I could amortize my investment and so that it makes sense? We are seeing huge huge price per square foot investment made in the build out of these restaurants. I think the restaurants are in a really interesting position where it's not just the food that has to be good and the service and the experience, but on the experience side is making sure that the restaurant is Instagrammable, that the experience is unique, that you're able to get, the word out there. Some of these food and beverage concepts get more out of a viral video, post on TikTok, going viral, than they do from marketing that they invest money in, right?
Right.
And so, it's really an interesting dynamic where it's taking longer, I believe, for the restaurateur to break even, right? Because of the huge investment that they have to make up front. You look at a restaurant like Sexy Fish, and you're like, wow, the every detail that is in there is extremely costly, right? And so, there are a lot of concepts like that, and I think that the restaurants have to find their angle. However, I've been to other food and beverage restaurants where they're very minimalist in their approach. And I forget the name, but I went to this restaurant. The chef is from Scandinavia, right? So he's got a very minimalist mentality. So the build out was actually very minimalist, but it was so authentic to who they are and authentic to the experience that it was beautiful, and it was very, very tastefully done. And I think that where I'm seeing success in the food and beverage industry here in South Florida is in authenticity. And I think authenticity wins out. And I think we're going to start to see, how successful some of these concepts are based on the investments that they made in their build out. But I think that it's a important conversation, because the tenants are asking the landlords for longer times. They're going to make a significant investment. They also want the landlord to carry a chunk of that cost, and I don't think that the landlords have yet seen that shift to see if it really merits because again, for them it's also longer time before they break even from that investment side, and they start.
And I think also the move, we've talked about this with other uses in other episodes, but the move from going from gross leases to triple net leases, that also has had a huge effect on restaurants, right? Because, now their fixed costs are significantly tied to the real estate. Right. But they're only fixed for a year, especially in the case of like insurance and property taxes. So,
but I wonder, we have a lot of conversations about affordability on the housing side, but I also wonder how that is affecting the affordability of local, food and beverage, mom and pop restaurants that want to open up, because now they're competing with groups that are coming in that are very, very well funded, right? And have the ability to do these things.
Right. And I think that that's where the landlord comes in and the location comes in, right? So a mom and pop probably isn't going to open south of 5th, Alton Road, south of 5th maybe, but Alton Road, Española Way, where rents are, for a second-gen restaurant, $135 a square foot plus key money for, that's a lot of food that you have to sell in order to make that rent every month. So a mom and pop is going to be more in the Little Havana areas, the Kendall areas, Westchester, more the suburbs, which actually makes sense too, just based on where people moved, and the millennials are continuing to move as they grow into their family forming years. So in terms of buying spaces, what you were talking about, I think that's interesting, because I know Robert Rivani did that. He's leased a lot of restaurant spaces, but he's also bought condos in buildings in areas that
have that food and beverage,
that have that food and and those tend to be dense areas, really difficult to get in because they are so dense, so there's not a lot of new product coming, and they're in buildings that either have a lot of office space or residential or hotels or mixed use or whatever, so they already have the traffic. So I think that's really interesting. But to your point, your clients bought in very, way more the local market, right?
Right.
So the pizza place out on Sunset and Galloway, I mean, those locations, that makes total sense because that's an area where there are a ton of residents, not high density, but people willing to drive. There's good parking, and that area is exploding in terms of more and more people moving there. So that makes complete sense.
It's also interesting because there, like in that particular location that you're speaking about, there had never been a restaurant there. Then there was a restaurant there from the prior owner. That restaurant only lasted 8 months. So now my clients bought it, they activated it. It's been now 5 years where they have had an incredible success. So now that there's also a proof of concept.
Right.
So if in the future they decide, we want to sell the real estate, they have proven the concept that it works there.
Right.
And that if you have the right style, the right approach, that you can be successful. So, their success on their business operating side is also adding to the value of the real estate, side of things. So, but for them, when they're looking at their balance sheet and they're looking at their P&Ls, that is a controllable expense, which adds again to the profitability of that concept.
Right, and I'm trying to think. I'll think of her name in a minute, but she did the same thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Red hair, amazing chef. She was out by. She did Redfish.
Sure. She did Forte and.
I'm totally blanking, but she was a pioneer too. Here she is. She took a space out in West Kendall and put in a luxury, kind of high end. Chef Adrian. Yes. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Brain.
I was gonna let her
Chef Adrian,
for a little
I know
longer,
you did.
guys.
I was gonna start sweating. But yeah, Chef Adrian, she's amazing. And I remember thinking when I went to her restaurant when it first opened, what made her open it out here? And exactly. There's some other examples of restaurateurs who've taken the risk and opened in neighborhoods where they're the only restaurant, right?
Correct.
And
but think
Soika
about,
was the same. I got you there.
You got me there.
Soika was another one.
I mean, there was nothing. There was nothing in that area, until Soika arrives. And then now, it's full of amazing restaurants. It's a vibrant vibe.
But there was nothing there for a really, really long time.
Right, correct. It's not like they were there 3-4 years before. No, they were there a decade before anything was happening.
And I think that's kind of our point, because restaurants are difficult to operate. Margins aren't very high. And in an area like Miami that has a lot of transient people, tourist space, etc., there are options that aren't South Beach, that aren't those really, really high rents. And people, as Chef Adrian proved, as Soika proved, people will drive to you.
Right.
And I find at least that Miami foodies are pretty loyal to chefs. I think of Niven Patel.
That's true.
I'm a total fan. I go to every restaurant he ever opens. I mean, I know he's amazing. And so it doesn't really matter where he opens. He doesn't need to be in the super, super high rent area because people will follow him.
By the way, I know where we're having lunch now. Thank you.
Okay, I don't yet. But, and going back to the Bon Appetit article, they mentioned they mentioned six, as I had said, 6 of the restaurants. Yeah. And one of them, I loved his story, North Miami, and it's called Smith & Webster, and it's a former NFL player, Kayvon Webster. He retired from the LA Rams and moved back to Miami, ran a truck food business, and then opened a brick and mortar and in North Miami Beach. Now, for those of you not from Miami, North Miami Beach is not Miami Beach to the north. It is an actual separate city that has nothing to do with Miami Beach itself. Yeah. So the importance of having a broker who knows the area, because even for locals, it's
who knows that there's a North Beach and there is a North Miami Beach.
Exactly. Yes. But people who don't know will say, "Oh, I'm staying in North Miami Beach," and I'm like, "No. Are you in North Beach?
Yeah.
Mid Beach? South Beach, or are you in the city of North Miami Beach?" And then you get blank looks like, I don't know. So so I thought that was really interesting. And same thing, he has deep roots and went to North Miami Beach.
Yeah, that description of, that you mentioned from Bon Appetit magazine, and, another thing that has happened here is the proliferation of Michelin star, restaurants, and those casual restaurants that have gotten the Bib Gourmand also from Michelin. And it's been incredible to see, because I remember not too long ago the conversation was Miami is one of the largest cities that doesn't even have a 1-star.
Right.
And now for the first time we have a 2-star Michelin restaurant. Joël Robuchon's L'Atelier, right? Mm-hmm. Which by the way, was the build out was done by the same architects that designed and built the plaza in Coral Gables. Oh, okay. So the build out there is beautiful, and of course everything in that restaurant is incredible. But I do feel there's a sense here that sense that comes with youth. Like it's a restaurant industry that has been around for a long time, but it's kind of growing up. It's kind of evolving, and it's really interesting to see. We do I think you're right. I think Miami is a place where we're loyal to chefs, and we want to see them succeed, and we want to see what they come up with next, especially those that have a very clear point of view as to the experience that you want to have and the history of that. And I love the evolution of the brands, especially those regional brands that started 30 years ago and that have evolved and grown. Especially, one thing that I find really interesting and really exciting is, sometimes you see a brand that was started by the patriarch of the family, 30, 40 years ago. And then as the kids grow up, they become adults, they join the family business, they bring their own perspective, their own flavor. And now you see an amalgam of that old school and new school. What is coursing through the veins of that business throughout is that there are some very clear values that they will never ignore, right? That it's kind of their guiding North Star, but it feels new and it feels consistently the same all at the same time. And I think that is what the Miami food scene feels like. I also like that this program, this Miami Spice program, which really should be celebrated for its success, there are other cities in Florida that are applying it. So Broward has their own, and now Orlando has a program called their Magical Dining Program, which is going to also, which they just launched. So it's going to be interesting to see how other cities in the state of Florida are going to apply this and what that experience is going to look like. And for us that often travel to conferences in the state of Florida during the summer months, it's going to add to the culinary tour aspect of our travels.
Definitely, and it's not just about the Michelin star and the Bib Gourmand and the pricey. It's also about the neighborhood places by locals. We have some amazing hole in the walls, literally the hole in the wall.
No doubt. Correct.
That are just favorite local spots. I mean, I think of Kush and what he did with Stephen's Delicatessen in Hialeah. Yeah. I think of all these local people who have different visions of how to be true to their roots. Also, Kush also going back to the family. He wasn't in the family business, but he came from the restaurant business. But he actually recreated in Vicky's the ice cream malt shop that's next to Kush and Coconut Grove. He recreated his family's family room and kitchen. I mean, down to the Pac-Man game with a yellow shag carpet and an avocado green refrigerator. Yeah. And so those are kind of fun too. Instagrammable in different ways, but authentic. And I think that's what is so awesome about.
I also like that the Miami story is very much an immigrant story, and there are some neighborhoods that have developed a certain flavor for part of the ethnic group that has concentrated there, right, in their diaspora, right? And so, but then all of a sudden you look at a place like Little Havana, right, has that Latin flavor, for all the reasons of why it's called Little Havana. But then you have a little tiny place like Long Jai Thai Tapas, right? Opens up there, They barely have 20 seats. All the food is fresh. It's made right in front of you. It's an experience. There are no reservations. You got to make a line. They only open up for lunch and dinner, and they have a break in between. I remember seeing people coming from Brickell to go close to, I think it's on 17th Avenue and Southwest 8th Street, and people out there making a line half an hour before lunch begins, an hour before lunch begins. You just drive by and you see the line, you know what they're waiting for, and it's quick service, it's great food, it's very authentic. It's not a place that you would associate with Little Havana, but it has found its niche. Place, its niche, and it has been embraced. Right? And so that's a really interesting dynamic. And again, small little space, but when you look at it from a business perspective, the revenue per square foot that business is generating has to be incredible, Exactly.
It's like the little ventanitas. When you see the ventanitas that have a line, you're like, that's right. That's what I want to go to. Right. And to your point, the revenue that they're making price per square.
And shout out to Sandwich de Miami for opening the first ventanita in the city of Coral Gables, which they open at the plaza.
I'm surprised ventanita.
Yeah, I know.
Coral Gables.
I know. Listen, hey, it took a lot of work.
I'm sure it
but
did.
It's done extremely classy. It's really beautiful. I mean, we could go there for lunch too.
We got so many options. How lucky are we?
I know, exactly. All right, my friend, do you have your stat of the day?
Well, it's not a stat. It's just a fun fact. So August 1st, the beginning of Miami Spice, but it's also National Albarino Day. And having just been back from Spain, I'm going to push Albarino. It's a great white wine to have in the summer in Miami. So I guess I'm having wine with lunch today.
Sounds like a wet lunch. So my stat is really about domestic migration. Since 2022, we were this comes from Gay Cororton, who was breaking down the IRS numbers for the inflow of or the net inflow of income into South Florida and throughout the state of Florida and throughout the country. So Florida comes at number one. So the number of people that in-migrated from other states into Florida represents a net inflow of income of over $36 billion in the entire state of Florida. A big chunk of that comes here to South Florida. We know that 1 out of every 5 international homes sold in Florida are sold here in South Florida. We have Texas coming second at 10.1 billion, Carolina at 4.8 billion. So there's not a lot that are in the double digits. The next one is Texas at 10 billion. Florida is at 36 billion. On the other hand, California has had the largest net income outflow, 23.8 billion, followed by New York at 14.2 billion, Illinois at 9.8. Must be, I know where a lot of that money came into. New Jersey, 5.3 billion, and then Massachusetts at 3.9. So it's really interesting that part of the conversation that we're having, it's not just about the number of people. And, when we're on the street and we're talking to people, it's not just about the number of people that are coming here, but is to the point that we were making about restaurants competing with restaurateurs that are coming in with deep pockets and with a lot more income. And that's something
they're following their clientele.
They're following.
Right? Like the New York restaurants that are opening down here because they see that their clients are moving down here. So that doesn't mean they're closing up there. It just means that, hey, if they're going to be spending at least half a year in Miami, then maybe there's potential for us to succeed there, and they have found success. So.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for this hungry-inducing episode. Mouth-watering episode of Between Two Chairs. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe on our Between Two Chairs YouTube channel, which is live. And also want to, thank you again for the support, and we would love any feedback. We got a couple of things in the works for us to be able to get some feedback out. So I appreciate everyone who is listening, and that's it for me.
Ciao for now.
Ciao, and bon appetit.